Thank you very much for staying with us here on the Key Points. Now, the National Cathedral project is suffering from some serious reputational damage due to the lack of resources to fund the $350 million project, which was originally meant to be a private support project. Well, things have starkly changed over the last 3 years, and some 200 million cedis down the line, there isn't much work to show at the project site. Many are also critical of the project support from government over what has been described as a U-turn from a private pledge to a public project in the wake of severe economic challenges. Now, many Ghanaians complain about the high cost of fuel, high cost of transport, high cost of living, and so much else. But as a majority of us are Christians, there are questions about whether we should suspend the project. But the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, and the Executive Director for the National Cathedral Secretariat last week appealed to all Ghanaians, their love for the Almighty, and urged them to lend their support unconditionally to the National Cathedral project. Now, it further emphasized that in comparison to government's overall expenses generally, the inflows into the National Cathedral project have been very, very limited, according to the Finance Minister. There are also questions about the circumstances under which ICGC leader Dr. Mensa Otabil distanced himself from the project, and the claims that there might be other church leaders seeking to do same. Well, in the wake of all of this, the Secretariat issued a 7-page multi-point statement in the hope that it answers every person's questions and paves the way for the project to continue without angst and meet its completion date of 2024. We are live here on TV3 and 3FM, also 3news.com. Feel free to share your thoughts to our Facebook page and to our Twitter page as well. It's TV3_Ghana. It's 3FM 92.7. Our WhatsApp line is 055-369-8789. And let me introduce our guests who are joining us on the show. To my left is the Honorable Joseph Kpemka, former MP for Timpani, former Deputy Attorney General. He joins us this morning. You're welcome.
Thank you, Jifa.
And then we also have the Honorable Ricketts Hagan, who is the MP for Cape Coast South, former Deputy Finance Minister. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And joining us on Zoom is Professor David Abdullahi. He's a governance analyst. Once we have him fully on Zoom, we'll bring that to you. So I'll start off with the Honorable Kpemka. Quite a difficult week it's been in addressing the National Cathedral project. About 2-3 weeks ago when I treated this, a suggestion from Joe Jackson was that government suspend its contribution to the project in the wake of the current economic challenges. The Finance Minister tried to go on a charm offensive, appealing to our religiosity, our love for the Almighty, and justify the need for this monument. Where do you stand on the issue?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Thanks to your many viewers, and thanks for the opportunity given me, and very good morning. My very good friend, the Honorable Richard Hagan. First of all, I have stated time and again that this particular project, which is a national monument, and it's a national monument that will stand the test of time and the benefit of generations now and generations yet unborn. And so if we put all our soldiers to the wheel and support the project to its realization or fruition, then we're going to have to add to our lot a very big national monument that will serve the purpose. So I will say that I personally support this project, and I know most of the complaints that we have are basically talking about the economic circumstances now. It isn't the case that everybody is against it, but people are talking about economic circumstances. But I have said that there may never be a day when the circumstances of our economy will be such that we should be able to fund any project that we have. because we don't have enough, and we've never had enough, and may never have enough. Those are basic. We try to manage the economy in a manner as to maximize happiness among the population according to the dictates of the directive principles of state policy. So if you look at the brouhaha behind the National Cathedral, and you rightly pointed out the total cost of constructing the project to be 350 million United States dollars. When I did a rough calculation and I did a multiplication of that by 8, that's 8 cedi to a dollar, we have about 2.8 billion Ghana cedis that will be able to fund the project from beginning to the end. Now, if you have about 2.8 billion cedis, and the state has contributed so far, let's say by the records that we have 200 million, then you have just a little over 3% of the total cost or the total amount needed for that. And so if government initially said that it was going to contribute some seed money to it, which we were not told the specific amount anyway, and just so far the release shows that it's about 3% of the project funding and etc. I will not say that it is too much in the circumstances, because if we had gone beyond the 30-40% mark or 50% mark of contribution from government, then we could cry wolf to the high heavens. But to say that government was going to make a contribution and a commitment to this laudable initiative, and to have done so within a percentage of 2 to 3% in the circumstances as we speak, it's not too much, so to speak. But the cry has always been whether or not at this particular critical moment of our developmental agenda, the myriad of problems that we are encountering and the very many issues that are bedeviling the nation, whether that should be a priority. That has been the discussion.
That's not the only discussion, Honorable Kwemka. The other discussion has to do with allegations or accusations of deception.
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
You see, so but basically the argument has been economic, that we do not have the financial wherewithal today. We're not capable financially to be able to fund this project, looking at our economic basket that is available now for distribution to the various sectors and facets of our economy. That has been the major argument. The other one has been, I've heard a number of people who have said that the foundation of the whole project has started with lies or something, and so they do not believe that.
Well, I wouldn't put it in those terms, but more
about
the fact that
I have listened to
the
people.
Foundation, this is a personal pledge.
That is where
if the decision is to change it,
I think
then we should level up with the Ghanaian people and say so.
I think we are getting it wrong. You see, when a president goes about pledging that he's going to construct roads, is he going to use his own money to construct the roads? When he says he's going to construct a university, is he going to use his own money to construct the university? When he says he's going to build a cathedral, does it mean that it is a personal pledge and so he will use his own money to fulfill it? In any case, when you are doing campaigns, you make pledges and promises, and those ought to be fulfilled when you have been given the mandate and you've won power. If you may talk about statutory interventions and breaches maybe in the course of implementation that we need to streamline and look at in the light of the circumstances of our economy and our laws. But to say that it's a personal pledge means that that monument he was putting up is personal, and it's not. Clearly, it is not. It is something that is meant for, if you look at the release that was done last night, you know, it's very clear that it's a national monument that all of us are going to live to be able to celebrate it and how it will impact on our lives by way of organizing interdenominational services and other such like activities. You know, we have many other countries that have national cathedrals, even though others too do not have. But to say that it is a personal pledge, what it means is that we're then expecting that the funding will come from his pocket. And therefore, when he leaves office, the project becomes what? Private property, and he goes away with it, or it's public property. So we are mixing the issues. The president made a pledge in the course of his campaign. Now the problem is funding, and he's actually charged the private sector and the churches and institutions to make contributions. He himself committed to it by putting something on the table. He made an initial contribution of 100,000 Ghana cedis, if you remember, and others have come up with different contributions, etc. So I will say that based on happenings now, in fact, I was with one of my very good brothers, the Honorable Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa, on another platform, and we had the opportunity to discuss this issue. And initially, I was hesitant in a number of ways, because one of the issues that baffled me was the revelation that one of the persons on the Board of Trustees had resigned under circumstances that were not clear. Again, the clarity has been brought forth because last night's statement states clearly that he had said that he wanted to be excused because he could not have the time to be able to do what was required of him under the circumstances. There is no justification for any claim of maybe acts of impropriety that instigated his decision not to continue to be a member of the Board of Trustees. There's nothing of the sort on record. As we speak, the Board of Trustees have clarified and they have stated without equivocation that, look, this situation was necessitated by the fact that he has to be excused, and then we have excused him. And he's since been replaced, and etc. And moving forward, the project needs fruition. And so all hands will have to be brought to the wheel to push it hard to ensure that it succeeds. But as I stated earlier, the argument which is hurting and continues to hurt is the economic argument. And the economic argument, there are two sides to it. As I have stated, yes, it may not be right time. The question is, when is the right time? Can we ever have a situation where we say, yes, now it's right for us to go ahead and have a national cathedral, and that all our problems have been solved?
Okay, let me put you on hold there for now. Let me come to the Honorable Ricketts Hagan. Honorable Kpemka made an interesting analogy, and you are good with numbers. 200 million cedis spent so far, even if it's more, maybe 250, but the entire project will cost some 2.8 billion. Yeah. So to be fair, the contribution looks really insignificant to warrant this whole hue and cry. It may seem like a storm in a teacup.
Thank you very much, Chief. Good morning to you, and good morning to my brother, whom I haven't seen for quite some time. And good morning to your viewers and to Prof. Online.
Abdullah, yeah.
Abdullah, yeah. I think we have mixed up this whole issue. The issue is not about economics. The issue is, the economics is secondary. The issue is about deception and confusion about this whole project. You know, and my brother said, rightly said, there are cathedrals elsewhere, you know, around the world. If you go a little into history, you realize that cathedrals, churches are built by kings after they have won a war they never expected to win. Some kings have even built churches for their wives. You know, we've got churches built in memory of popes who later became saints and all that. So it's not a new thing. I think President Nana Akufo-Addo takes his cue from that history of wanting to build this kind of edifice in honor of his God, if I can put it that way, for helping him win 2016 elections. This is a fact. This is something he said, that the church was being built in honor of God. So it's a personal thing. Once it's a personal thing, it becomes private and not something that the state should fund. He went ahead and
said.
So
how do you reconcile that with the argument he made about he also goes around pledging to build roads, to build schools?
Well, he never said he was going to build roads for God. He never said he was building 1D, 1F for God.
Yes, he said he was building it for Ghanaians. That's also a pledge.
But then he never said he was building the cathedral for Ghanaians. The cathedral was being built in honor of the pledge made by the president that if God helps him to win 2016 elections, he will build his church in honor of his name, which is something that has been done in the past, as I said, by kings and by other people. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I could choose that if I win the next, elections in Cape Coast, I will build a cathedral, to honor God. That is my personal pledge. I'm not building the cathedral for the people of Cape Coast. Eventually, all these churches or cathedrals built by kings and queens and what have you were built as their own personal stuff. In the end, it became a treasure for the country. I mean, you have St. Peter's Basilica, which is in Italy, in Rome, the Vatican, built, and then now it's a tourist destination. You have St. Paul's Cathedral in the UK, in London, the same thing. You have the Church of the Savior on spilled blood at St. Petersburg in Russia, same purpose. Metropolitan Cathedral in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. These have become tourist attractions, but if you go back into history, the intention upon which these churches were built was basically to serve God. But we see the economic side of it. And as I said, there is nothing wrong with that.
So the wrong is what?
The wrong is the deception. The wrong is for the president telling us that he's building something which is supposed to be his personal pledge, which then becomes private and will be funded by the private sector by going around the world to raise funds. And then it happens that it is the state which is gradually and progressively funding this structure. That is where the problem is. Level up with Ghanaians. Let us know that, look, if we build a cathedral, these are the economic benefit. So whatever money that we sink into this project, we will be able to get it in a form of tourist revenue or income that in the end will pay for itself. We will ring fence the revenues that we get by people visiting this cathedral, which is done elsewhere, and whatever we get is what will eventually pay for this. Therefore, there is a justification for the state in doing this, because you can make a different argument. Building this will create jobs in the construction sector, because this is going to be constructed. Building it will bring tourists into the country, so there's going to be some revenue. Don't tell us that you are building your Tower of Babel, and then now this is clearly a Tower of Babel.
But that's unfair, Honorable Hagan, because...
Let's draw the comparison here. You know, if you go into history again, the Tower of Babel, what happened to it? The Tower of Babel was done on deception. It brought confusion. It divided the people. Even their languages we hear were changed, and they scattered around the world. That is probably why we are sitting here in Ghana as a result of our ancestors leaving the Tower of Babel and coming here. It was supposed to be a tourist attraction, in addition to it being a church. Because if you remember, if you go into the Bible, it says that they were building the tower so they could stand on it to look at the city.
To go high into the heavens.
To go high into the heavens.
But the point I'm trying to make is that you say that it's gradually, slowly becoming a public-funded project. The numbers don't lend credence to that, because if this project cost 2.8 billion, and over the last 2 years, all government has given is 200 million.
You see, we forget that the land upon which this church is being built is a state land, and it has a value. So you have to add that when we were building, you are not only talking about the brick and mortar, you're also talking about the value of the land.
Yes.
What is the value of the land? You have to add that to the cost.
So all of that is the seed money. How do you know that government is going to give more than that?
And we are not talking about the completion of a church here. We are talking about a church that has barely started. So God knows what else will go into it. They are going to make another justification why they should put another state money into it. If really this thing has really caught on as they made us think, and that they were raising money in the United States and all that, and this is an attractive project for the private sector, you would have thought that by now there should be enough money that they wouldn't even need to take money from government. Yes, they told us there was going to be a seed money. Nobody told us how much. In fact, maybe, I don't want to sort of put the blame so much on Parliament, but if you are actually going to give a seed money, you should tell us how much seed money was going to go into it. This was left blank, obviously, only to find out that, whatever percentage that they are talking about, 3%, 1%, or whatever. We have contributed so much so far, little as it may sound, but the project hasn't yet left the floor or the ground. So who knows what else is going to go into this project, going forward.
Okay.
It is a bad, not building. You see, the problem that, or the blackmail here, or the emotional blackmail here, especially to us Christians, is that the president is building a church for Christians and we don't appreciate it. But really, that is not the point. The point is that the president made a personal pledge to build again the Tower of Babel.
No, to build the National Cathedral.
And now he wants us to, the president wants us to,
in honor of God,
the Tower of Babel was built for the same
win
purpose.
Of 2020
was built for the same purpose. And then now they are attaching, the reason why I call it Tower of Babel is now that they are attaching tourism to it. Because the Tower of Babel...
It was always part of the plan from the very beginning.
Well, then...
From the design and
advice,
all those things.
As you said, my good friend Joe Jackson said that they should put a stop to it. Look,
they should suspend.
If the president wants to honor his own personal pledge, then I will suggest
that $100,000, 100,000 CDs will not do.
And then another thing, they said the president build roads, build this. Do you know that you remember honorable member said here, former member of parliament said here that the president contributed 100,000. Mm-hmm. Has the president contributed to the 1D 1F? Did he contribute to the roads that they say they are building? So this is what situates this project into the private personal pledge that we are talking about. So we should not mix this up with other projects being done by the president, as if the church is something that the president is doing for us and we don't appreciate it.
Okay.
We would want to have a church, but not done through deception.
Okay, let me take Professor Abdullahi, who is joining us on Zoom. Professor Abdullahi, so you've heard the arguments for and against, but I'm just wondering, is there a governance challenge here for the current administration? Because...
Good morning, Jifa, and
good morning,
my
sir.
Colleagues on the panel and to your viewing public.
Great.
Yes, I think if you look at the press release yesterday by the National Secretariat, it's long overdue. I think they should have come up front to let Ghanaians know, with the approval of the trustees, of course, that is a public project, because that is what they said in the press release. It's no longer a private project. It should have been upfront. And then also, just like the Honorable Ricketts Hagen was talking about, to tell Ghanaians what is the cost that is going to be borne by the government, which means what percentage of the total cost of the project should be borne by the government. And I think that is where transparency comes in. That has to do with governance. Then also, you address the various issues that you see are concerns that is raised by the public once you had come up front and made this very clear, and then you deal with it. And then apart from that, you become sincere with the public to tell them and update them continuously on the improvement as well as the milestones of the project. If you don't do that, and you come back up later and say, well, this is going to bring about tourism, I think it's not wrong. Now that it is very clear that it's a registered company and it's a public project, then you should continuously engage the Ghanaian public as to what it is. Jifa, when you talk about tourism, I had an opportunity to do a program in Yamoussoukro in Côte d'Ivoire, and I went to visit the Grand Basilica that was built by Houphouët-Boigny. I can tell you the number of us that were tourists that went to look at the project or went to visit the cathedral was very minimal. So it ended up actually being funded again after it has been built by the state. So I think we should be very, very careful. I don't know whether there are cost analysis or whatever that has been done to show that there's this projection to show that this is the amount of revenue that is going to come in if this thing is built, because it needs to be maintained. It's not just building it, it has to be maintained. And that's a lot of cost that goes into it.
In terms of the position that it's a personal pledge, he's the president, but he's contributed his 100,000 Ghana cedis. There was a pledge for seed contribution. Yes, you've indicated that there was no specific cap put on it. We don't know if there will be a cap. what would you advise the government or the president to do going forward, separate from what the National Cathedral Secretariat has done, which is to issue a statement and to update on the various levels?
I think one cardinal, aspect of governance is that you must be transparent and actually let people know. You take them along with you. Now, I think the Honorable Penka talked about the fact that one of the concerns is the whole notion of the so-called deception. Now that it is clear that it's a public project, there must be constant update of the people about the costs involved. Because, when you are building a huge project, the cost keeps on going up. For example, if you look at the cost of cement today, as well as iron rods and all that kind of stuff, it's not the same as the time when the project was started. And it could be, who knows how long these wars that are happening between Ukraine and Russia is going to take. Now, when that happens, if you're honest with people and you tell them, well, I made a mistake, actually, it's a public project, I'm building it for Ghanaians and all that kind of stuff, I think people would square with you and say, okay, we forgive you for such a faux pas. But right now, since it's a public project, you also engage the opposition, because some of them are Christians. And if they are part of it, what about if you are not in government the next time? They should be able to continue with the project. And I think that is where I see the importance of engaging the public and engaging your opposition as well. Because then they become supporters of the project moving forward. Because it's not going to happen immediately. It might even take longer to finish this project.
All right. Let me read some text messages that have come through to us, and then I will come to the Honorable Kwemka. And as expected, many of you are sending messages on this. Gabriel from Winneba Rice says, Jifa, former President Mills was accused of using the Flagstaff House as a prayer camp by the very people in the current administration who are now building a cathedral with public money. This one from Prince Henry Koforidua. Jifa, no single textbook, no money to pay caterers, cooking in various basic schools, but the government can use over 200 million of tax money to build a national cathedral. This is a misplaced priority by the Akufo-Addo administration. Son of Salia from Wa Rice, good morning. I think government needs not to support the National Cathedral because already it's given out land for that project, and that is support. There is also no openness on it. Samuel writes, Jifa, pledges and promises are either spoken about publicly or captured in manifestos. This wasn't, and that's what makes it personal. In any case, the release by the trustees seems to have worsened an already bad situation, and that's from Samuel. This one from Ali from Nima. Please, Jifa, please ask us, what does it mean to say that this is by all of us? Because some of us are Muslims and we are not in tune with the National Cathedral. So they should also stay away from taxpayers' money as well. Robert from Tamale says, Jifa, the president never told Ghanaians that if you vote for me, I will build a cathedral for you. It was a pledge by him personally to God, and Ghanaians were not fully aware until he started it. That's from Robert in Tamale. And this final one from Kojo in Tema. There's nowhere in the NPP manifesto or campaign message that the president will build a cathedral should he win. It was later, after the election, during his winning speech, that he stated that he had promised God that he would build him a cathedral for winning the election. That cannot be a national pledge, but a personal one. Many strong views there, Honorable Kwemka, about the project. But let me ask you, Honorable Hagan raised an interesting issue that we are not seeing much from the project. We've already paid $6 million to the architect and his entity, I would have thought that you would see some significant work before paying this full amount to the architect. But it seems he got everything at once. And that's also a concern about what is our process. Would we pay contractors all their money ahead? We don't. And that's why a lot of them always come back to agitate for their money. How come it's different for Sir David Adjaye?
Well, of course, if you have a situation like that, it may have been instigated by a contract you entered into. And the contract you enter into, there are terms. And if the terms are that as soon as you start implementation, you are supposed to pay the architect the entire amount due him, then you have to go by that. So until you see the agreement that was signed between the trustees and Sir David Adjaye, you cannot criticize the mode of payment, because you see, if I decide to go in for this bottle of water to be sold to me at 2 cedis, and the agreement I have with the seller is that as soon as he presents it to me, I pay, then I have to honor that. So it will depend on the contractual relationship that existed at the time that they were entering into this for the implementation of the project. So you cannot blame the government for making such payment, and if it was part of the agreement that initially the parties had before the implementation started. So you have to look at it within a certain context. You are looking at it from the general perspective that we do not pay contractors their full amounts, as it were, in our system until they have finished and completed the project and handed over. But in the circumstances of this, remember that the architectural designs had been completed and handed over to the trustees, and they started the implementation project with the contractor. So depending on the agreement that they had to fulfill that side of the contractual relationship by satisfying the architect so that he could also have been paid for the work that he has actually done. So the circumstances of each thing must be put within a certain context and perspective. Again, having listened to Prof and my brother Richard Hagan, what I can say is that, you see, in trying to criticize this particular initiative, I realize that Prof has been very professional the way he handled it by seeking to point out the fact that non-disclosure may have also instigated what happened, and that if there had been disclosure in good faith to the public, the brouhaha would have been avoided. For example, the entire amount expended was not known until issues started being reported in the media, social media, and etc. And so the clarification was then made by the minister. So I suspect that that could have happened earlier to avoid the current brouhaha surrounding the release of the amount. That at any point in time, there's an official communication from Ministry of Finance that as part of the contribution that we pledged to make, which is the seed money, we have today released this amount of money to the trustees for the implementation of the project. It will be in the national discourse. People may criticize it, people may have problems with it. In the end, issues are resolved and the project implementation goes on smoothly. But where it is not done, for example, and then until it is discovered and then it comes up, then people begin to raise questions and etc. But I have said time and again that the project is absolutely necessary. We need to put all hands on the wheel to ensure its success for the benefit to trickle the people. My brother has also looked at the fact that kings and queens in the past across the globe had gone through wars, and after wars they made pledges, personal and etc., to build cathedrals, and they did so across. But this is our situation. This is our national monument that is coming to fruition. Again, if you look at even for what Prof said, which I agree with aspects of that, because it is my hope that this project is completed before even this government leaves office. But if it is not, and let's say that in the unlikely event that the NDC comes to power and they decide that it was not part of their programs and projects and they decide to abandon it, then we'll come back here and discuss that. We've gone to throw good money out there and we are not ready to finish it so that we can put it to good use and etc. But I can say without a shred of doubt that if there is commitment by the private sector, the churches, and government to it within the 2 years and more left.
So government should put
finish
more
this
money
project.
in, because from the statement from the National Cathedral Secretariat, it doesn't look like this project is a private pledge matter
It's been
anymore.
made very clear from the release that
So
was
you've
made.
converted it, in effect, with the support of Papa Osofo, to become a public pledge, something that maybe the majority of us did not agree to or were not consulted on. They are doing it on our behalf.
Jifa, there has never been a clear statement stating that it was a pure private endeavor. There has never been any statement.
Oh, the president said so, please.
He didn't.
It's just that
You
now
see,
maybe the circumstances are
from day
changing.
one, the president has also indicated, as you are very much aware, that there was going to be a contribution from the state.
Yes.
And he mentioned the seed money and etc.
And we're told the majority of the funding will be supported by the private sector.
If the state is contributing to that particular entity, it can no longer be private, clearly.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah. If the state is contributing to it, it can no longer be private. At worst, you can call it a public-private partnership. But you cannot call it entirely private when funds of the state are sunk into it. That's the point. Otherwise, you are redefining what private means in the law. Because if you talk about something that has to do with private, then it doesn't necessarily include contribution from government coffers. Okay? For example, if you look at 1D1F, in the most of the 1D1F implemented, as my brother was talking about, across the country, it is a private entity that leads the process and government only facilitates. I don't know of any place where government sank in money directly to the establishment of those factories. So what we find mostly is that government facilitates from the back and ensures the success of the project. But in this particular one, from day one, government made it very clear, categorical, that we're going to ensure that there's a contribution from government by way of a seed money. And I'm saying that once that was made at the very beginning, then it ceases to be an entirely private endeavor, and it becomes a private and public partnership to ensure its fruition. Even if you look at the release that was made by the Secretariat, it is very clear now that the essence of the whole project is to ensure that it becomes a public property and a national monument, so that all of us can together do whatever we are expected to do in there to the glory of God and for the development of the country.
So, Honorable Hagan, clearly things have changed now. What do you project will happen? Will Parliament be asking the finance, because now it's clearly become a public project, even though I've seen media reports where the clergy themselves had committed to secure private funding, even though the state had promised something, but the view was that it was going to be really minute. So what happens now going forward? Now that we have all been roped in, it's now a national project, someone has to build it, it has to be paid for. Will the NDC continue it if, for instance, the current administration were, for instance, not to come back in 2025?
Yes, Jifa, I can see a lot of challenges with this project actually going forward. Now that the board has come out with basically making it a public project, and my brother has introduced an interesting model here, the public-private partnership. That changes the whole thing. If indeed this project is now a public project and is going to be a public and a private partnership, then it should be subjected to the laws of public and private partnership. We have laws governing, PPPs. So we will have to go and look at this whole project again from the beginning, if that is what it is now, and subject it to PPP laws for this project to be able to continue and to come to Parliament and actually make it now a public-private partnership project and tell us the terms. How much is the public contributing to the project? Now it's no longer a seed money, and how much is the private sector going to contribute? That is, if we know what the total project will actually cost. Because in public-private partnership, you can have government putting in seed money for preparatory work, to make the project attractive for the private sector to want to come and invest in. This could be one of those projects where no investor will get up and say, I want to come and build a cathedral. But then if you make it attractive, and I believe that's what the seed money was supposed to do, to make it attractive for the private sector to come in. Now, also the second thing. Again, we go back to the original, what we were told originally, the deception, that this was a private thing being built by President as a result of his pledge. Now, supposing that in a very likely event that NDC comes to power next year, we need some clarity on this project, whether it is President Nana Akufo-Addo's own, project, or whether it's a public project, and what are the terms of any future government. We are a country, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have other religions. We could, in the future, have a Muslim president, for instance, and meet a pledge by a Christian president to build a church. Does that Muslim president continue the Christian president project if it is not a state, and I say state in its right
project?
So there are serious complications. This project started on a false start. It's a race to build a cathedral, started on a false start. And we need to go back. If you are running a race and there's a false start, the gun will go up again and say, go and start the race again. You can't finish false start. This is what has happened. Through deception, we've had a false start in the race of building the cathedral. Now that it has been clear, or they've made it clear that it's a state project, let's go back to the blocks, the drawing board, and look at this project again. Again, since the time they started the project, there will be variations, obviously, from 200 million sunk and nothing much. We need to know again, review the cost of the project. Tell us it's the PPP. Then we subject you to the PPP laws in Parliament to reapprove the project. That is, if they telling us the seed capital thing was an approval, reapprove this project and do it as a national project. The challenge that we're going to have, that the moment you bring it into the national space, that this project is no longer Nana Akufo-Addo's project, but is actually the state, we will have to state the benefits of this project to the state, economic benefit. Because whatever we're doing as a commercial property, if that is what it will be in the end, will have to bring some benefit. If it's a social project, social infrastructure, schools, hospitals, it also brings benefit in terms of welfare, the welfare of people, getting our people educated and all that. We've got to subject this project now as a national project to these things and decide that under the current economic climate is the cost-benefit analysis of this project situate well in a high inflation economy being consumed by debt and deficit, economy being consumed now by fuel crisis, economy now being consumed by high interest rate as a result of trying to fight inflation, and all the hardships and challenges that we are facing at the moment. Even if this project is economically viable, is it economically viable now in terms of us being able to do this today? Or maybe look at, as somebody said, suspend it and look at it in the future. So now they have opened a can of worms with this statement that they've come up with.
Okay.
And the drawing board is where we should be going
looking at
to restart this.
Let me take a final point from Professor Abdullahi on this, because we're going to come back and talk about the hearings of the Privileges Committee. So Professor Abdullahi, so now we have gone beyond private project, is now a national project. The view is that we should all embrace it. We know that not all of us are Christians, and there are concerns. You even raise sustainability issues. How do you want us to tackle this now going forward, now that this is where we are? We may not all agree, but this is where we are.
Yes. First of all, it's not a bankable project. So, that the private sector would invest in it, in my opinion, they have to get something out of it. It's not a bankable project. It is now a public project as per the release. I think first there needs to be an effort on the part of the government to be able to bring the people along, as well as talk to the opposition in parliament and make sure that, whatever it is, to say, look, we should have done this much earlier, but we made a mistake. We apologize. This is where we want to go with it. We need your support. And with that, I'm sure Ghanaians would be reasonable. Then the second issue is the whole notion of priorities. Is it a priority now? If it is not a priority now, what is the discussions about it? And all these are what I talked about, the challenges. Pre-project, during the course of the project, and post-project. All these things need to be discussed. And if it is now a public project, all these things need to be clearly defined so that whatever is coming out, the public is not going to be felt like they are hoodwinked. And I think at the end of the day, it will help. Because now, whether we like it or not, the project has started. It is a public project, as the National Secretariat have said. And I think the trustees also need to go back and really think about how they are going to engage Parliament to make sure that, since it's a public project, how are we going to fund it? If there are issues, how do we make sure that we all come together to be able to put this project across? But for me, I don't want us to be, have this feel good thinking that once you build it, the tourists will come. It's not going to happen. If it's like that, it's going to be a field of dreams. And I think at the end of the day, we need to be practical as a country, as a developing country. And as it has to do with governance, be upfront, be transparent with our people. And I think that's where I have an issue.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Abdullahi. There will be just
If I can make just a quick point.
Okay, just a quick one.
Another thing that has come to mind now, if this is now a public project, then we should begin to examine the private people who are investing money into this project. We don't want the project to end up with drug barons investing money in it, or people who have certain interest in Ghana, either our asset or something, and for that reason, they are bringing money in here. If it was a private project, anybody can bring their money. But once it becomes a public project, the investors must be known and approved by Parliament.
So some scrutiny there. Honorable Pemba, any quick point from you before I wrap it up?
I'm actually done with my submission on this issue.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And it's still the key points here on TV3 and 3FM. We take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of your messages. And then, of course, the Privileges Committee hearings this week.